hospital after that fatal facelift. Her father was telling Michelle McNeil to just swallow it.
One major factor for the prosecution on this case, they say that McNeil's long-term affair with Gypsy Willis was the former doctor's motive for allegedly killing his wife.
Willis testified she met Martin McNeil online in November 2005, and by January, the relationship had turned sexual. The affair continued until the day Michelle McNeil died.
Are you familiar with what was happening on April 14th?
I believe that was the day of his wife's funeral.
And did you attend that funeral?
I did.
Oh, Gypsy. Woo. She testified that the very day after Michelle's death, are you sitting down? She sent sexy pictures of her back and her rear end to Dr. McNeil, the supposedly grieving husband who was her secret lover.
What are these pictures showing?
They are of me in a mirror, exposing my back.
Is it exposing below your back as well?
There's one picture where it's a little bit suggestive.
It's showing your buttocks.
It was a circumstantial case, but in the end, prosecutors convinced the jury that McNeil did it.
The jury, having reviewed the evidence and the testimony in the case, find the defendant as to count 1, murder, guilty.
I can't believe this has finally happened. We're so grateful.
Now, at first, police think it's a tragic accident, but family members were certain that Dr. McNeil was responsible. A series of bizarre clues emerged. Martin allegedly pressured his wife to get a facelift. He demanded to be in control of dispensing her medications. And Martin had a seductive mistress, a young brunette named Gypsy Willis. Now, Gypsy recently appeared on our show, and she admitted that she and Martin participated in a lot of scandalous activity, much of it while the dirt on his wife's grave was still fresh. Tell me, what is it you want people to know about you?
The portrayal of the media has been very, very harsh.
You were his mistress.
I was.
The truth is, you were potentially an incentive for him to kill his wife, which a jury just found him guilty of.
Yeah.
As you sit here today, do you believe he is guilty or do you believe he's innocent?
You know, the jury came back and they said that he's guilty. I believe he did not kill Michelle.
But they used you as motive.
They used me as motive, yes.
According to a search warrant in 2004, you told your then roommates that you wanted to get rid of Michelle.
These particular roommates that came forward had moved out of my home more than a year before I ever met Martin. I believe that they wanted attention, and
they said they saw a picture of his wife in your room.
That is totally impossible.
Did he invite you to her funeral?
No, he didn't invite me. I wanted to go and pay my respects.
You sent him seductive pictures the day after he buried his wife. True?
They were pretty tame, but yes, there were photos that were sent. I wanted to distract him from his grief, and I wanted him to still think of me.
You move in as a nanny.
That was the way I was portrayed to the family and neighborhood.
And you and he, of course, knew that you were a lot more than a nanny.
Yes.
Did he chew you up and spit you out?
He betrayed all of us, all of our trust. He's destroyed my life.
Well, Martin and Michelle's second oldest daughter, Alexis, is here today. Now, after Gypsy's interview on our show, we wanted to give her a chance to be a voice for her mother. And you won't believe what she has to say about my conversation with Gypsy. Alexis and her family fought tirelessly for justice for their beloved mom. They refused to rest until her dad was locked away behind bars.
My mom and dad were married for 29 years. My father was a physician. He was someone who I looked up to. Things began changing around the time my father turned 50. My mother began to become concerned that he was having an affair. My father, out of the blue, told my mother that he was going to get her a facelift. My father demanded that she go through with it right away. My mother was frightened. She said, "Alexis, if anything happens to me, make sure it wasn't your father." After getting back from the facelift, I called and my father answered. And he said, "Your mother's in the tub. She's not breathing." It hit me like a ton of bricks. I was shaky inside. I just knew that my father had killed my mother. Less than a week after my mother's funeral, he said, "Alexis, I found the perfect nanny. Her name is Jillian." And I said, "Dad, Gypsy Jillian Willis?" And I know Mom was worried you were having an affair with her. Gypsy knows a lot more than she's letting on. I believe that she was involved with killing my mother. The autopsy report stated that my mother died from natural causes. My sister Rachel and I began this 1.5 year crusade just to try to get someone to look into my mother's death.
On the jury, find the defendant guilty.
I feel very relieved that my father is now going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. It's been the worst nightmare. My mother was my best friend. My whole world was taken away from me the day my mom died.
Well, Dr. McNeil's daughter, Alexis, joins us today, along with her aunt, Linda, Michelle McNeil's sister. So I welcome both of you here. Let me say I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that both of you are here because Gypsy came in and answered my questions, and I sure wanted to hear what you guys had to say about this as well. Once the death and the investigation, all that, did you learn a lot more about your father than you knew before?
Yes, you know, the father that I knew was basically a lie. We uncovered a web of lies that surrounded my father and uncovered who my father actually was. She turned to me and said, "Alexis, if anything happens to me, make sure it wasn't your father."
Why would your mom think that your dad wanted her dead? How would you describe the relationship with your mother, between the two of them?
I thought my father loved my mother. You know, they were married for 29 years, and my mom loved him and loved her family.
Did you ever hear them argue?
I did, and my father was a controlling person.
When you heard them fight or argue, what was it about?
The last time I heard them argue, shortly before my mother's death, she had wanted his phone records because she had found him calling this woman, who turned out to be Gypsy, and she said that she was not going to let that rest, that she wanted his next set of phone records because he was denying this affair.
Did you ever talk to her about that when you overheard that?
Yeah, I did. I talked to my mom several times. She confided in me about her concerns of my father and
So Gypsy Willis was on your radar long before she showed up as a nanny?
Well, shortly before, because as soon as I found out about Gypsy, my mother was dead a few days later.
Yeah. Why did your mother decide to have a facelift?
My dad, out of the blue, said, "I want to give you a facelift." This was the day after she confronted him about being concerned about this Gypsy Willis. And then out of the blue, he said, "Well, let's get you a facelift." And
she didn't want to do it? She didn't ask to do that?
No, she didn't ask. He said he was going to give her a present of a facelift. And she thought, well, you know, I guess I'll go to the consultation. And then she liked the doctor once she met him. But she didn't want to get the facelift, and especially right away. But he did. He said, you know, you have to do it. I've already paid for it.
Was there a point at which she told you she was concerned about her safety?
Yeah.
What did she say?
Well, there were several instances, but the last one was while she was taking a bath, I was helping her wash her hair, and she turned to me and said, "Alexis, if anything happens to me, make sure it wasn't your father."
If something happens to me, make sure what?
Make sure it wasn't your father.
Make sure it wasn't your father. Did that shock you?
It did. I didn't take it seriously at the time. I said, "Mom, what are you talking about? He would never hurt you." And a day later, she was dead.
Now, there has been testimony that he asked her surgeon to prescribe certain drugs for her, and the list to me looked like it went beyond what you would normally have to control pain from that kind of surgery.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
He had a list that he brought to the plastic surgeon and said that he wanted my mother prescribed extra medications, extra narcotics, some things that he said that my mom might need.
Right. And then he was dispensing the medicines to her.
Initially, when she came home from the hospital, he was, until I went in there the next morning and my mom was completely sedated. I confronted my father. I said, "What did you give her?" And he said, "Oh, I must have given her too much and over-medicated her." And from that point on, I said, "I'm taking over the medications. You're not to give her any medicine."
So you found her completely unresponsive,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. When she woke up, she said, "Alexis, you know, your dad just kept giving me pills. He kept saying swallow." And at that time, her eyes were bandaged. And she had me give her each pill so she could feel in her fingers and know what medicine it was in case he tried to give her more medication.
So she knew something was going on here.
She was very concerned.
So she was in fear at that point.
She was fearful.
Why would your mom think that your dad wanted her dead?
I don't know. I mean, I know that she was concerned about the affair. Maybe she just had some intuition.
When you left to go back to medical school, that was how long after you found her unresponsive?
That was about 6 days, and she was doing great by the time I left. I mean, she was back to her normal activities, and we'd just gone out to dinner. I wouldn't have left if she hadn't been doing so well.
Right. So she was fine at that point.
Yeah.
So you thought, okay, she's got her faculties back, she's up, she's moving around. It never occurred to you that he would still do something?
No, I mean, if I would have been concerned, I would not have left.
How long before you got the phone call?
I flew out the evening of the 10th, and it was the morning of the 11th that my mother was murdered.
So you weren't out of the house 12 hours before he made his move, according to court testimony.
Yeah.
And tell me about that phone call.
Well, I actually had received a voicemail from my father while I was in class, and I listened to it, and it said, "Your mother's not listening to me. She's getting out of bed. You need to call her and tell her to get back to bed." And I just thought, that's really strange because she'd been doing so well. I mean, she wasn't staying in bed. So I called home, and no one answered. And during my next break, I called home again, and my father answered the phone and said, "Your mother's in the bathtub and she's not breathing, and I've called an ambulance."
What was your first thought?
My first thought was he killed her.
You just knew it right then?
I knew. I dropped all my bags and jumped in the car and started driving to the airport, and I was just screaming that he killed her. He killed her.
Okay, so you get home, you drive to the airport, you get a flight, you get home. Tell me about your first interaction with your father when you saw him.
I walked right back into the bedroom, and I went right to where the medicine was kept, and all the medication was gone. And so I turned to my father, and the first thing I said to him is, "Where is the medicine?" And he said, "I don't know. I think the police must have taken it." Later, I found that he had had my brother and his girlfriend flush the medication down the toilet and throw it out, you know.
Linda, how did you learn about it?
My sister, Carrie, called me and said, "Have you gotten a call? Is there something wrong with Michelle?"
What was your first reaction once you knew it was true?
I said, "Oh, he finally killed her."
All right, let's take a break. Next, Alexis says right before her mom's death, her mom told her that she suspected Martin was cheating on her with a woman named Gypsy Willis. Well, you won't believe what her father and Gypsy did just weeks after her mother's funeral. We'll talk about that next.
My father called me and said, "I found the perfect nanny." And I said, "Gypsy Jillian Willis, Mom was concerned you were having an affair with her, and you're not to move her into the home." He basically said, "You're no longer welcome in the family." Shortly after my mother's funeral, my father told my sister Rachel, "We need to find a nanny. Let's go to the temple and we can pray about it." As they were waiting outside of the temple, this woman came up to my sister and my father and said, "I was at the funeral. I'm so sorry for your loss." And my dad looked at her and said, "What's your name again?" And she'd said, "Jillian." He later found out that was Gypsy. They'd set up this encounter with Rachel as an introduction to then bring her in as the nanny.
Well, Gypsy Willis says that she had no idea Martin McNeil was planning to kill his wife, Michelle. And it's even harder for her to consider the possibility that she could have been the motive behind the murder. But the doctor's daughter thinks Gypsy is lying. She believes Gypsy was involved in plotting to eliminate her mother from the equation. That's an allegation Gypsy absolutely denies, and she has not been charged in relation to Michelle's death. She says, I talked to her, she says, didn't see any warning signs, had no clue, was shocked, and to this day believes that your mother just had a heart attack. Why do you believe otherwise?
She's an actress. I mean, I've just gotten to know who Gypsy Willis is, and she is a lot like my father.
Well, Alexis found out after the fact that Gypsy was brazen enough to attend her mother's funeral. Not only that, Gypsy admits she was sending provocative text messages to Martin throughout the entire day. She even texted him during Michelle's funeral service. Take a look. Did he invite you to her funeral?
No, he didn't invite me. I wanted to go and pay my respects.
You understand how that sounds to people because you disrespected her in life, but you wanted to pay your respects to her in death.
I felt sorry that I had been involved inappropriately before it was a possibility. I was so sorry for his family.
Did you text him twice during the funeral?
I did.
You sent him seductive pictures the day after he buried his wife.
Yes, there were photos that were sent.
But one was your bareback to a mirror, and I mean, they weren't like
Yeah, I think my dimples
at
were
the Grand
showing.
Canyon or something.
Right.
These were private pictures.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
I wanted to distract him from his grief, and I wanted him to still think of me, even. There's no way to go through this and sound good. I am sorry.
She's coming on saying that she was sorry and she respected my mother, and she was involved. She had no respect for my mother or my family.
How did your father behave at your mother's funeral? Was it what one would expect, or was it something unusual?
It was unusual. I mean, he began her funeral talk with a joke, and then he didn't mention my mother at all during the talk, and only talked about his childhood and how he had so many hardships in his life. But at the funeral luncheon, he was joking and saying he needs to get used to being a bachelor.
So the eulogy was all about him.
It was.
Not about her. That sounds very narcissistic.
He's a very narcissistic man.
I'd like for you to listen to what Gypsy had to say about pretending to be a nanny moving in to the home. You move in 9 days after he buries this woman into her house, right?
Yes. Why?
Why?
Martin and his family were in deep chaos, and my background was nursing. I thought I could help.
How did his children react?
Well, his oldest daughter had been there trying to help, and there had been some personality conflict, and he needed different help, and so it doesn't sound right. I'm sorry.
You move in as a nanny,
yes.
right? That was
the way I was portrayed to the family and neighborhood.
okay, and you and he, of course, knew that you were a lot more than a nanny.
Yes.
That you had a separate relationship with him. Did the kids suspect that there was more going on when you first moved in?
No, not when I first moved in. I have heard now that they have, or they did, perhaps, but not at the time.
That's not true. Before she moved in as the nanny, my father called me and said, I found the perfect nanny. And this was about a week after my mother's death. And I said, what's her name? And he said, it's Jillian. And I said, Gypsy Jillian Willis. Mom was concerned you were having an affair with her, and you're not to move her into the home. And he was irate, screaming at me, and he basically said, you're no longer welcome in the family. He had this plan. He had my mother's murder planned out and had her moving in right away. And then as soon as she moved in, he got rid of all the children. Gypsy is master manipulator. She's a con artist. She's a lot like my father. Gypsy's former roommates came forward and said that Gypsy wanted to kill my mother, and she had talked about cutting my mother's brakes on her car and having her die in a car crash. And they had said to her, Gypsy, you know, she has young children. And Gypsy said, they'll probably be okay, they'll be in car seats.
You say that your father and Gypsy created this elaborate ruse for him to find her. Tell me about that.
Well, he had talked with my sister Rachel and said that we need to go to the temple to pray about getting a nanny. And they went to the temple, and Gypsy shows up outside of the temple and comes up to my father and says, I'm so sorry for your loss. I was at the funeral. And my father said, oh, well, I forget, who are you? What's your name? This was Gypsy's way of being introduced to the family and I guess being a divine answer to prayers.
So this whole thing was set up.
Yes, and she discussed that in court, how this was all planned.
So we're going to go pray about this, and then as an answer to prayer, here she is.
He had this plan. He had my mother's murder planned out and had her moving in right away. And then as soon as she moved in, he got rid of all the children.
And what do you mean he got rid of all the children? Now, there were 8 children, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Four had been were raised.
There were the 4 of you. And
then my 4 adopted sisters.
4 adopted sisters from?
Ukraine.
So who was she nannying?
I guess my thoughts exactly.
I mean, it didn't even make common sense, right?
No. Then she said that she was nursing my father back to health because he was claiming that he had cancer and multiple sclerosis and was dying, which was a lie as well.
So he claimed to have cancer but didn't.
Yeah.
MS and didn't. Now, this cancer that he had was located where? Is
his toe.
In his foot, his toe?
And that's, that was his reasoning for not being able to help my mother out of the bathtub because of his hurt toe. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Okay, he has a sore toe.
Basically, yeah.
So he can't
lift her out of the
pull her out of. And
save her life.
What did your mother weigh?
About 170 pounds. He was a 220-pound, 6'3" man. I mean, he was very capable.
He allows this 6-year-old to come in and find her in the tub.
No, it's horrifying. Ada, it's just been horrifying for her.
Why not just get divorced? If he wants to be with Gypsy, we call that divorce. You get a divorce and you go do what you want to do.
I know, but he'd spent, I believe 30 years of his marriage creating this facade of who he was, a respected physician and attorney in the community, a family man. And I believe, if he would have gone through with a divorce, not only would he have lost money, but he would have, that facade would have crumbled. And he wouldn't have been portrayed as who he wanted people to think he was.
His ego wouldn't stand that.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right. Next, Alexis reacts to Gypsy's shocking confessions. We'll be right back.
I'm disgusted by her and by her actions.
Was she a Wiccan priestess?
She had a shrine of my mother and was casting spells. My father's brother was found dead in a bathtub, very similar to how my mother died. He's a dangerous person. He can't hurt anyone else anymore.
Your father was in the military.
He was.
And was he discharged for mental illness?
Yes. We uncovered documents, his discharge documents, and mental illness played a part into his discharge. I know he used that defense later when he had some issues with fraud and forgery. So one of his mistresses who testified during the trial came forth to the investigators and told them that my dad had confessed to her about killing his brother, drowning him in a bathtub, as well as killing some patients that he had worked with. He worked at a facility that housed severely mentally disabled people, and he said that he had killed several of them as well.
Right.
He also mentioned to her that he had tried to kill his mother as a child, and she did come forward to the authorities.
Wow. And there was a blog created once all of this started coming to light, and people that had encountered him as patients started coming forward at that time, right? And they made what allegations?
They made allegations of rape, just abuse allegations.
And these are all allegations. I want to be very clear. No one has sustained a charge in that regard. These are allegations. They haven't been proven, but they all became part of the fabric of what you were learning about what was being said about your father, at least. Are you surprised that you missed so much this bad about your father? You say he was an actor.
Yeah. He was a master manipulator. He was a person who was able to lead pretty much two lives. And yeah, it's horrifying. This was a man that I loved and respected.
What do you say to yourself?
Looking back now, there were red flags. I would have done everything to save my mom.
Are you angry at Gypsy?
No, I like to not try to think about her very much. Want to focus on more positive things and focus on my mother. But I'm disgusted by her and by her actions.
Was she what's known as a Wiccan priestess?
That's what I've been told.
What the hell is that?
I have no idea. But she had a shrine of my mother in her room, and told that she was casting spells, or I don't, just unbelievable things to try to harm my mother.
Well, Gypsy's ex-roommates testified in court that Gypsy kept photos of Michelle in their apartment, spoke about cutting her brakes, had a shrine there. I asked Gypsy about that. Listen to what she said. According to a search warrant, an affidavit in 2004, it said that you told your then roommates that you wanted to get rid of Michelle.
These particular roommates that came forward had moved out of my home more than a year before I ever met Martin. I believe that they wanted attention.
They said they saw a picture of his wife in your room.
That is totally impossible.
Did you ever make reference to cutting her brake lines?
I never said that to anyone about
anything. Did you ever
anything.
make reference to giving her undetectable medications?
No.
Wiccan priestess. I mean, is this this is something where the roommates say she was casting spells and had this shrine and was really focused on her in some way. She says, didn't happen, couldn't have happened. What do you believe?
I believe it did happen. I mean, her roommates really had no reason to come forward. They were actually fearful of Gypsy and were scared to testify.
We reached out to Gypsy and asked her to respond to Alexis's allegations that she is a Wiccan priestess, cast spells, and had a shrine to Alexis's mom in her home. Gypsy says that's laughable and completely untrue. This was her response. LOL, sorry to disappoint her. I have friends who are a variety of things, but I am personally of no particular religion. I see many parallels in so many beliefs, there is no point in fighting, excluding over it. I just try to incorporate basic goodness into my life wherever I find it. While I respect all beliefs equally, I don't have any religious affiliation at all. He moves into your mother's house 9 days after she is murdered, then ship off 16-year-old and just appropriate her identity, did they just sit around and hatch crimes? Now, after Martin moved Gypsy in as the nanny, one of the things he did was send your 16-year-old sister, Giselle, to visit relatives in the Ukraine, right?
That's correct.
So Gypsy could steal her identity.
Well, and that's exactly what happened.
Take a look at this, and then I'll get your reactions. You and Martin were arrested for identity theft.
That's correct.
Tell me what happened.
When Martin and I got together, I had significant debt. He wanted to add me just to give me access to the accounts under his daughter's social security number.
So he has a daughter named
Giselle.
Now, Giselle is out of the country.
This is true.
He says, okay, she's away, so he says, we'll just use her name and her social security number.
Yes. He said that, one, people wouldn't notice. Two, we were just doing it to grant me access to the account, and there was no injury to Giselle.
Whose decision was it to send his 16-year-old daughter Giselle out of the country and back to the Ukraine?
I think it was a family decision, actually. They had found a living sister in Ukraine, and so they had been corresponding back and forth, and Giselle wanted to go live with her sister.
And the reports say that once she got there, she couldn't get back home.
When she got there, Martin had doubled the family's income, and he spoke to her frequently, at least once a week.
Did she have any idea that you had stolen her identity?
No.
Because it just seems beyond coincidental that she gets shipped off, you take her identity, and that it seems like he got rid of two. Killed his wife and shipped his daughter. You took her identity and moved into his wife's house.
Well, not in that order. It was. We thought about this after the fact,
yeah, I
after all these things.
You understand there is a pattern.
Yes, I understand, and it looks awful. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, it looks awful. He moves into your mother's house 9 days after she passes or is murdered. Then ship off the 16-year-old and just appropriate her identity to perpetrate. To get access to these accounts so the government won't know she has access to money because she owes them. Did they just sit around and hatch crimes?
I believe they did.
I mean, that sounds very sociopathic on all of their parts to me. Did he take care of and stay in contact with your sister while she was in the Ukraine?
No, he abandoned her.
No contact.
No contact.
While they steal her identity.
Yeah, they took her U.S. passport, too, to get back to the United States. So she had no way to get back.
Who took it?
My dad.
Martin took it.
He said that she needed to give it to him because she'd probably lose it.
So he gets her in the Ukraine and then gets her passport and then cuts off contact with her and steals her identity. When they steal this identity, they go file papers for different things. Mm-hmm. One of the misrepresentations they made was that they were married.
Yes.
How did it feel that they used their wedding date as the date of your mother's funeral?
I mean, it's horrifying to uncover, but not surprised knowing how evil and calculated these people were.
Chad Grenander, the prosecutor in Martin McNeil's murder trial, is here in our audience today. He has seen a letter that Martin wrote to Gypsy's parents a month after his wife's death. And I'm really curious. Chad, thank you first off for being here, and thanks for being so dogged in this prosecution.
Happy to be here.
Tell me about this letter.
It's interesting because in the letter, it's obvious that he has met Gypsy's parents earlier, probably a week or so earlier. So this is less than a month after Michelle's death. But in the letter, he expresses to Gypsy's mom that he will be eternally grateful for Gypsy becoming a part of his life. So that was huge, that he's expressing that kind of love for a woman within a month after Michelle's death.
Right.
And the relationship escalates. By around July 4th, he's on bended knee asking Gypsy to marry him. So things went really, really quickly. There were comments to her mom about, I never really loved Michelle. I loved her more like a sister, not like I loved Gypsy.
Were you able to talk to the jury after the verdict came in?
We were.
What really drove the decision for them?
The escalation of his relationship with Gypsy within a month before Michelle's death, her coming into the home right after her death, the spike in the drugs on the first night home when Martin has access to Michelle after the surgery, and then there's a tapering down for several days. The very next opportunity he has access to her, when Alexis leaves, there's the spike in the drugs, she's dead in the bathtub. That, in addition to the application where you talked about how they used their marriage date as Michelle's funeral, those were big facts. In my closing argument, I referred to the almost perfect murder. It was only almost perfect because he left a number of clues behind.
Yeah.
A number of them.
Let's take a break. I have one important question for Alexis when we come back. I know it's all been reopened and raw from the trial and all. It would bother me greatly if you harbored feelings of guilt about this or played the what-if game with yourself. How are you doing with all that?
You know, I've gone through so many emotions, and I'm just relieved at this point that justice came from my mother. And I'm just so happy that I have my sisters to focus on. I was able to raise them, and they're just wonderful, beautiful girls, and we're just very relieved that he can't hurt anyone else.
Will you ever speak to your father again?
No, I won't. I mean, I'll have to see him in court. Sentencing is coming up, and I know throughout the years there was going to be probation hearings, and so I'll be seeing him and dealing with him for a long time.
Is it your thought and feeling now that he's where he belongs and he needs to stay there?
He's exactly where he belongs.
Do you hope that he never gets out?
I do.
You do?
Don't want him to hurt anyone else.
I have to finish this conversation by giving you an opportunity to tell us about your mother.
Oh, she was just the most beautiful woman on the inside and out. Someone that loved everyone and loved her family.
I know it's difficult, but I really hope that you focus on the process of her life and all of the joy and memories that you had, and not just on the day of her tragic death. That was one moment in the movie of her life, but all of the rest of it was so joyful and so happy and so giving that that's a life to be celebrated and not remembered because of that painful moment that she became a victim. And I hope you choose to do that. I would like to thank Alexis and Linda for being here to share their thoughts and feelings. I would also... Here's a photo she took in her husband's car of a suspicious broken red fingernail. Here's another mysterious pink hair she claims she also found in his car. In this photo, she suspects it's a footprint on the back of the driver's seat, possibly from another woman. In fact, she's taken 72 photos of things that she finds questionable. She says her husband is a liar, and she's desperate to prove it.
Ed and I have been married now for 20 years. Ed's told me he's thought about other women, sexted, chatted with different women throughout our marriage.
I've never had sex with any of the women that I've communicated with or touched their bodies.
Even though Ed's given me a list of women that he's cheated with, I've never been able to prove that Ed has physically cheated on me. I've taken pictures of his clothes, looked in his phone at messages, his work emails, and I have looked in his car.
Sarah spends a lot of time looking for evidence of affairs.
This is a photo of Ed's car with smeared glittered lip gloss, pink hair. I don't have pink hair. A broken red fingernail. I don't have fingernails. A footprint on the back of his seat, a footprint on headrest, and if I had to guess, he was having sex in his car. I took 2 of Ed's laptop computers into a forensics computer store. I found out that Ed would send meeting invites to fellow coworkers and put secret messages within the invites. It was white text, and so you had to highlight the text and put a color to it so you could see it. These are pictures of Ed's shirts, and that is the back of the upper neck where it looks like more footprints in here.
I've given her every ounce of truth that I can many times over. She's still very much unsatisfied.
I've tried as hard as possible to find evidence against Ed, and it doesn't matter. He always denies it. It just makes me feel like I'm going crazy.
Well, Sarah says Ed's given her plenty of reasons to feel crazy.
Ed's been lying to me the entire time I've known him, but I didn't find out that he was lying to me until 2003. I found an email that Ed had sent to another woman that said, if we're going to do this, we need to be careful. When I questioned Ed about the email, he said it was just a joke.
Shortly after the email, Sarah had gone through my phone bill. She recognized that there was a phone number on there that was on there at all hours of the day and repeatedly.
When I called the number, out of curiosity, a woman answered. He said it was a woman at work that he'd been talking to, and he knew it was inappropriate, and he'd stopped.
We did stop communicating, but I had a work relationship that required us to still have emails, and that conversation, unfortunately, became more and more friendly again, and within a few weeks, we were communicating inappropriately.
This woman that Ed cheated with is a disgusting pig. She crashed our vacation in Disneyland. He stayed in a hotel room with her overnight, had phone sex with her, and swears he never touched her body parts anywhere or ever kissed her.
We lied in bed together, talked intimately to one another.
They just laid there looking to each other's eyes and talking. It's insane. It's not possible.
The emotional affair lasted 2.5 years.
12 years later, I believe Ed's still in a relationship with this woman.
Okay, let me start this out by asking you what you want the focus to be while you're here.
He and I, what do we do? Is it savable? Is it not savable? Do I know everything? I don't feel like I do. And I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to
Okay, well, I'll let you ask
that.
a million questions. Ed, what do you want to focus on while you're here?
General interest is how to rebuild trust and communicate. I think that's really what we've lost all capability how to do.
Or do you think you're trustworthy?
I believe so.
So you don't think that she has any reason at this point, maybe in the past, because you said in the past you hadn't always been forthcoming with her, but you think now that she has no reason to not trust you at all?
That's correct.
Is this what y'all want to talk about? Whether or not you can trust him or whether you can't? Because I know one of the things you've said to my team, who has worked really hard to try and get this prepared for me to focus on what you guys want to, is that you didn't like the focus. You didn't like what we were asking questions about. So just hit the erase button on all that. You're totally in control. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. You just tell me, ask me questions and I'll answer them. We'll do whatever you want to talk about.
No, it's not that I didn't like the focus.
No, actually, that is what you said, because I have it right here written down. That is what you said. So, but that's okay.
It is, but
we'll just hit the erase button on that. We'll talk about what you want to talk about now.
Truth, I don't think he's telling the truth. And I think I have huge trust issues. He's not the nicest person that he could be. He's pretty self-centered. I think that's why I said I didn't like the focus, because we were just looking at one piece of the prongs.
And what piece was that?
It was the sex addiction.
The cheating and all?
And it was like, okay, well, yeah, that is huge, because trust is a main thing, but...
Yeah, well, we kind of got off on that tangent a little bit, because I got emails from you here. Help, please. Family of 4 being devastated by sex addict, lying husband. This one, desperate for help. My husband was diagnosed as a sex addict. He cheated. Desperate for help, please. Destroyed by lies and secret. My husband is a sex addict. He's been lying for 20 years. Still has not told me the truth. I'm pleading for your assistance. I'm at the end of my rope. It's a losing battle. Urgent, desperately need help. Everyone suffering but my husband. He's a sex addict. He's cheated on me our entire marriage. So we kind of got off on that tangent.
Right, because I feel like trust is
But you see why that's the
Absolutely.
one prong. That's what you wrote about.
Right. I wanted it to be the bigger picture, but I understand that
Okay, so you wanted Okay. But
Does that make sense? I
no,
mean,
it doesn't, because I kind of feel like I know what I'm doing and what I need to focus on. But as I've
Then
said,
do exactly what you're
no, I've
supposed
said
to
I'm
do.
turning it over to you. I'm
No,
going to
I
let
want to.
you decide what we talk about. So your first question is, do I think he's trustworthy? Do I think that you're at a point where you can really believe him when he tells you that he is telling you the truth?
Yeah.
What are you pretending not to know? Do you think for a second that this man was in bed with a woman for how long were you in bed with this woman? Overnight?
2.5, 3 hours.
2.5, 3 hours, but it was during the night?
It was during the night.
Okay, and your story is you laid in bed with her. Were you all naked?
No.
Okay, but you laid in bed with her for 3 hours, 2.5.
Right.
And never laid a glove on her.
Towards the end, I did kiss her neck for 10 seconds, and that was the end of the night.
Okay. All right.
No, I don't believe that.
Okay.
There's a million things I don't believe.
Okay, so you don't believe that?
No.
I'm sorry, I don't believe you. But I don't. I'm just telling you the truth. I wasn't there. I don't know. You might as well have slept with her, because you're going to get credit for it till the day you die. I mean, you understand that she's never going to believe that.
It wasn't my hesitation.
But here's the point. One of your questions is, you want me to help you determine whether or not he has cheated on you and been inappropriate, right?
Yes, because I could tell you he has, but he will deny it.
Okay, but you...
I'm sorry.
You don't need him to tell you what you already know.
Right, but this is where he argues that I'm crazy and that I'm damaged. And of course I don't believe him because I'm traumatized. And so I needed you to come on here and say, maybe I am crazy, maybe I am traumatized, or maybe I'm not. And that's what I need from you.
You're not crazy, you are traumatized, and you don't need him to tell you that that was not okay. Well, we need to take a quick break. Up next, a key piece of evidence that could prove Ed has been fishing for more than just compliments. We'll be right back.
This is an ad I came across in 2012 that I can identify the body almost exactly as Ed's.
There's only been one ad that I've posted on Craigslist.
I think I've seen about 10 ads on Craigslist that could be Ed. Recently, I had a big client say that they didn't want to rehire me because I was still married to Ed. They felt like the drama distracted me from my work. My client didn't think I could work for her again until I divorced Ed. I'm extremely embarrassed that my marriage is such a disaster that I can't even keep a job.
Sarah believes her husband of 20 years lies to her about a lot of things, but she's recently had trouble proving it. Has Ed stopped lying, or has he just learned how to be a better liar? That's one of her questions, which is a really good question. In 2012, Sarah says a family member brought something to her attention that, well, she just said she couldn't ignore it.
I've never taken any pictures of myself and sent them to anybody or posted them on any websites.
Ed has sent me pictures of himself naked, so when I do see ads that look like him, that are naked pictures, I can look at the ones I already have and identify them.
There's only been one ad that I posted on Craigslist, and that was in 2008 or 2009.
This is an ad I came across in 2012 that I can identify the body almost exactly as Ed's. Typically when Ed sends me a naked photo of himself, we'll put his hand on his stomach to hide moles. He will stand with his legs apart because he does have thicker upper thighs. And in this photo, that's exactly how this person is standing.
I've certainly read, observed, seen it all, but that was the only ad that I've ever posted or replied to.
I think I've seen about 10 ads on Craigslist that could be Ed. When I see ads like this that I think are Ed, it just makes me think that he'll never change.
Okay, was that you in the picture?
In the video? Oh, no, absolutely not.
You didn't take a picture and put it on Craigslist? Have you ever done that?
Never.
Uh-huh. Do you believe that?
It's been, no. I've been going through this for so long, and I've been told I'm crazy or traumatized or whatever, that I don't almost know what I believe myself.
You're using this term crazy, and I've not performed diagnostics on you. I've not gone through careful psychometric workup on you, but I'm a pretty good judge of horseflesh, and I can tell you that, to use your term, you're not even almost crazy.
Okay.
Not even almost. You are obsessed with this.
Mm-hmm.
You are experiencing a lot of anxiety. You're experiencing depression. I think about the only thing right now that would make you happy is to learn that you're correct. You almost need to know that he is doing all of these things, which would be bad news at one level, but good news at another, because it would mean that you aren't distorting reality so bad that you've spun off into the Netherlands.
I'm always trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, because when I say you're obsessed, you know what I mean by that. I mean, because you're like collecting souvenirs now. It's like a receipt here and a condom wrapper and plane ticket and all of that.
Yeah.
And you have a explanation for each one of these things, right? And you've given her an explanation for each one of these things. You've discussed them.
Some of them are not explanations of fact. They are, I don't know, I presume, because they happened years and years ago. Certainly these receipts, they're mine, but this is a small sampling of everything we talked about.
Was this yours?
Yes.
And because that looks like it's pretty fresh.
I would challenge to find out if that serial number has any date stamp. I bet it's from 1991 era.
Really, 91?
That's the last condoms I ever recall acquiring, yes. I've
been married 38 years, so I hadn't seen one of those in a long time. So I don't know if they hold their luster for that long. But what was the significance? Why did you pull these particular receipts?
So the way this works is through our whole marriage, we've been married 20 years. Whenever I approached him with something that I thought was suspicious, I got in return, until you can prove something, quit bothering me. So that made me have to collect what you call souvenirs.
This is April of 06.
So in 2012, when I knew I was going to confront him, I went through everything, because I knew if I confronted him, anything that existed, he would throw away. So in a book in our nightstand I opened in 2012, and in the pages were all these receipts and that condom in one page.
But do you really expect him to remember what he spent $9.98
that wasn't the question.
Cents on in April of 06?
That wasn't the question. The question was, why is there a condom wrapper in there? And that was just all together. So I just took a picture of all the stuff. I can't approach him without proof. So there's proof of something. What is it?
What is that proof of in your mind?
Well, we've been married 20 years. We don't use condoms. So there's a used condom. What's it from?
Okay, but why do you need him to tell you?
Because I don't want to feel like I jumped to a conclusion and we have 2 kids and we've been married 20 years.
Okay,
and
I'm sorry.
No.
Is it okay if he was in bed in a hotel with this woman, whether he had sex or he didn't?
No. No.
What difference does it make what he said?
You can't have a marriage with somebody who's not going to tell me the truth, the whole truth. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Let's take a break. We've all heard about drug and gambling addictions, but what about sex addiction? Ed says he was diagnosed with it. Is this a real thing? We'll be right back.
In 2012, my wife Sarah had done some discovery about sex addiction. She showed that to me, and I absolutely identified with it.
What I think makes Ed a sex addict is his excessive viewing of porn, his inability to not flirt with other women or to seek out other women. Our marriage counselor concluded that Ed was a sex addict, and surprisingly, I was happy. I felt like it was our opportunity to explain why our marriage sucked so bad.
Well, is Ed a sex addict? Is that possible since he says he hasn't had sex with any woman besides his wife? Do you think he's a sex addict?
By definition, no, because he doesn't fit the definition.
And what do you think? Do you think you have a sex addiction?
I think absolutely, yes, that I have a preoccupation, and I have said to myself on many occasions that I want to stop with whatever that preoccupation is, and it's continued to my detriment.
And you've been to treatment for this?
Quite extensively.
Yeah. You did inpatient and outpatient treatment for it? I thought you had, because one of the things you said is, I struggle with interrelation dynamics and being vulnerable and not isolating if I feel emotionally charged.
Certainly.
And that bugs you.
It just makes me laugh.
That bugs you when he talks like that and uses words like no boundaries and self-gratifying, and because you think it's rehab speak.
I think it's, yeah, if I can talk the talk, I can do whatever I want. It's my excuse. It's like, oh, well, there's a reason I do it.
How did the treatment go for you?
I would say
that... Did you
that...
think it was successful?
Absolutely. Well, it's ongoing. I've never... Since I started 2.5, 3 years ago, I've learned a whole new way of thinking about myself and about relationships and about emotions and relationships. It's just not something that's ever been in my vernacular. It's actually been something that I've tried to stay away from, to not invest time or thought into. I just was happy-go-lucky. Mm-hmm. Experiencing what I've been through, what I've learned, has opened up all new colors in the spectrum for me.
Right. How do you feel about your wife struggling with this pain and torment about whether or not she's in a dead-end street?
It doesn't matter what you finish the sentence with. I feel terrible. Everything is a result of my past, and I feel terrible about it all.
Have you been truthful with her historically about what's happened?
Since the day that she confronted me, caught dead in a lie, that evening I sat down on our back porch and I tried to recollect anything I could, and 4 months later we went through the disclosure, and since that time it's always been a matter of anything and everything I can recollect, full disclosure. We're talking 10, 15 years ago events sometimes, and those are, I don't want to say hard to remember, but the sequence of events sometimes and the milestones are all I remember, and so it hasn't been consistent. Not that it's changed, it's just
it's changed.
I can't remember what happened first, this or that. Like I said earlier, I can't remember if that hotel event was before, between, or following any of the conversations we had had about her.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lie.
Do you think he's still talking to her now?
I think he could be, yeah.
You still talking to this woman?
Absolutely not.
Well, Sarah and Ed aren't the only ones riding this relationship roller coaster. We're going to talk to their oldest son when we come back.
I filed for divorce from Ed in May of last year. I haven't gone through with the divorce because of our children, but both of my boys have been affected by my marriage to Ed. He's not a very good dad. When he is around, he ignores our children. I want Dr. Phill to get to the bottom of what is wrong at the core of our marriage, so my kids have a better future.
Well, Sarah and Ed admit the dysfunction and distrust in their marriage has taken over their lives. I mean, it's really taken over their lives, personally, professionally. But they say they're most concerned, of course, about the effect on their children. Here's what their 18-year-old son, Randy, has to say.
I was about 15 when I first started seeing my parents fighting.
I don't accept that you leave the house and don't tell anybody. I don't accept that you don't think you need the cop. It's not considerate.
I can remember one specific instance where I left to go get food and came back and my dad was gone and his wedding ring was flushed down the toilet and his phone was thrown in the pool. I was frustrated because there would be times where I'd be like upset, oh, my parents are getting a divorce, and then shortly after happy, saying, oh, they're gonna work it out, and then a couple months later, we're gonna get a divorce, and then being upset. It was just a big emotional roller coaster. What hurts me the most is that my parents are still together, and neither of them are happy. I wish my father had never cheated at all.
Okay, Randy, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to say what you wanted to say here briefly, and then I'm going to excuse you and speak to your parents. But and I don't involve children, but you're now of age and a young man, and I wanted to hear from you and see what you had to say about this. This has affected the family, right?
Yeah, this has affected home relations for a while. I've seen it for a while, the time that I've been home, when I am home. And if it could get resolved, that would be like what we would want to do.
And you say you wish that your dad had never cheated. What makes you think he has?
Just from what I've been told, like in the past.
By
my mom when she talks to me about it and stuff like that.
How does it come up where you talk to your son about that sort of thing?
When we started doing the whole sex addiction, recovery type thing, I didn't, because he is older, and if you are a sex addict, supposedly it's I don't know if it's genetic, or odds are your children will be. And so I wanted to talk to him about kind of what was going on, because he's going to have relationships in his life, and he's going to have to, I want him to get married and have a happy life and be faithful and be happy and don't feel like he missed out on stuff. So I kind of told him a little bit about, why you see me sad or crying. It's because, this happened. He doesn't know 1/10 of any of this. That's why I was a little concerned about that. Mm-hmm. But he does know about her, because it went on for such a long period of time. It is such a big issue and all of this that he knows about her.
And you get that this is between them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it does affect you. You're collateral to it, but you get this is between the two of them.
Yeah.
This is way above your pay grade.
Yeah, if I'm getting paid.
It doesn't have anything to do, these two can get along or not get along. It won't change how much your dad loves you, how much your mother loves you. It doesn't have anything to do with their relationships with you. It just has to do with how they negotiate and put together their definition of relationship between each other.
Yeah.
So what will it take for Sarah to believe Ed? Should she believe him? Should she trust him? I'm going to tell these guys what I think's going on, what I think needs to happen, and how I think they got in the situation they're in right after the break. Look, I think the only thing that is going to give you peace is for him to tell you that the things you believe to be true are true. Anything short of that, you're not going to think he's telling you the truth.
Well, and that's why he's offered, to take a lie detector test and to do all these things. And I've been like, do I want the marriage that has to take a lie detector test?
But you don't believe him.
No.
And there's nothing he can say. You say you want to take a polygraph. What would you ask? What would you want to ask him on a polygraph?
Have you ever had sexual contact with another woman since we've been married? Mm-hmm. And if he fails that, then I'm confirmed that I'm not crazy and I can move on.
Okay. But he won't take that polygraph.
I'd absolutely take it, and you're absolutely wrong. But
yeah, okay. So you have not had sexual contact with any woman other than your wife since the day you got married?
100% correct.
Okay, there you go.
Right.
Do you think you have behaviors that are change-worthy?
Certainly. Absolutely.
Yeah, because you seem very smug and aloof about this whole thing, like you're just kind of tolerating the whole conversation. Because you don't seem very bought into her feelings about this at all.
I'm absolutely bought in and invested. This has been 3 years of this. I understand what's going on, and I was just curious how you came to the interpretation that I'm being aloof. I haven't felt that I've been addressed very much.
Floor's open. I'm just
I'm not asking to be addressed. We just haven't spoken much. So I'm listening.
The
I'm
floor's
observing.
been open for you to get in anytime you want in. That's what I mean.
Your question is, do I have things that I can change? Absolutely.
You know, there's a really old model that kind of describes this, the dynamic that goes on here. You get into these ego states, and it's really interesting. You know, you see people get into, like, the parent state. You look at them physically, they can be angry and impatient body language, finger pointing, patronizing. Then, like the child, for example, you get a lot of tantrums, whining, shrugging, teasing, and then you get into a relationship pattern. A healthy thing in a marriage is for people to engage adult to adult. And that's where everybody's on the same level and they're talking. And that's not what's happening here, because you're in a parent role here. You're holding him to account all the time. You're questioning him. You're tracking him as though he's a child. And so then he has almost no choice but to engage back in this way. And so you wind up with a parent-child relationship in a romantic situation, in what should be an intimate relationship. That never works. You say you need information to know whether or not you've been violated. You already know you've been violated. You just don't want to own it.
That's the piece that I'm stuck with, is why would I trust somebody who lies to me? Nobody would trust somebody who lies to you.
You already know that he lies to you.
Right. But he swears he doesn't lie to me.
But you already know that he does.
Right. Honestly, that's why I wanted to come here, to have you look me in the face and say, you're okay. You're okay to think these things. You're not crazy.
You're okay to think these things. You're not crazy.
That's all I needed.
Listen, I'm all about reunification of family, but I can tell you, if she is going to forever not trust you, and you know in your heart that, look, I've screwed up in the past, but I'm not now.
Right.
If this is a life sentence, you ought to run. You ought to not walk. You ought to run. If it's a life sentence, there's nothing you can ever do to vindicate yourself, then you ought to run.
There's no certainty in life, right? I'm absolutely there. You say we got to break this cycle. I agree. Despite the parent-child relationship, there is a certain symbiotic need when you have that relationship. I can try and be the adult. We don't have a relationship then. I can't just leave my wife and family with the mess that I started.
How about he's
It's
never
not
tried
up
to
to
deal with
me.
my trust?
Then
if
you
it's
need
a life sentence, we can agree that, but I'm not leaving. I'm not going to walk away.
Then you need to man up and plug in.
Dude, I'm there.
You need to man up and plug in.
I asked you before to define what that meant, and I still don't know, because if I'm not doing it, I need to know.
Drop all of the buzzwords and all of the rehab speak and look your wife in the eye and say, what can I do today to make your life better? I ran this off in the ditch. I'm going to do what it takes to get it back on the road. And if I have intimacy issues, if I'm scared, then that's what I mean, man up. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get real and be there with you, for you, by your side.
5 minutes ago, you told me to walk away from the life sentence.
If this is a life sentence, if there is nothing you listen,
she's told you it's not going to change for her. I told you I can't change the truth.
Let me tell you, if there's nothing you can do, if she is never going to turn you loose, then you should walk away and both of you start over. You'll spend the rest of your life doing this?
Absolutely not.
And spend the rest of your life doing
I don't want
this?
to spend another day doing this. I want to leave here and it'd be different. I don't ever want to feel like this again.
Well, it's time to hit the reset button.
And I went to.
One way or the other.
But it keeps it's like Groundhog's Day. It's just the same crap day after day and the same conversation and the same excuses and me.
Then change it.
And I try, but I feel like I try and then I hit this wall and then I get depressed and I don't get out of bed.
That ain't about him. That's about you.
It's totally about me because I can't deal with it anymore.
You can. You got to realize one thing. You don't need him to be okay. Because you know what? If this doesn't work, you'll be okay. You know what?
I just about struggle with kids.
If you trust him and he jerks you around, you'll be okay. You got to know that, and then then you don't have to worry.
As long as you're telling me I'm not crazy.
Okay,
I just don't want to be crazy.
Look at me. Look at me. You're not crazy.
Okay.
You're annoying.
You're right.
Coming up, a woman who started smoking when she was 14 and is now concerned her 14-year-old son will follow suit. Has her bad habit already rubbed off on him? We'll talk to her next. My next guest, Tracy, started smoking when she was just 14 years old. Now she's 43, has a 14-year-old son, and is worried the same smoking pattern will happen with him. Yet she still continues to smoke up to a pack a day.
I've been smoking pretty much my whole life. I started when I was 14 years old when I hung out with a headbanger crowd, and I thought it was cool, and I looked older. They all smoked. So here we are, my son's 14, and he is in a band. I see myself in him, and it scares me. I do worry about him picking up a cigarette and smoking it one day.
I have felt peer pressure to smoke. Smoking is a huge deal in the band scene, whether to just look cool or that your friends in the band are doing it too. If I wanted a cigarette, I could get it.
After almost 30 years of smoking, now I'm desperately trying to quit. I do worry about heart disease and lung cancer. My biggest fear is not being around to watch Austin grow up, to not be a grandmother one day. I feel like I'm a good mother. I think the only major bad example that I do set is smoking.
My mom is very, very afraid that I might start smoking at my age because that's the age that she started through peer pressure.
I want my son to live a healthy life, and I do not want smoking to be a part of his future. I don't want to see him go through what I'm going through now.
Well, Tracy is here, and her son Austin is in our audience. And also joining us is our good friend, Dr. Frida Lewis Hall, Chief Medical Officer of Pfizer. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So glad to see you. So, listen, you're still smoking, but you said you would quit smoking last week, right? Yes. After you took a trip?
Yes, I went camping and I told everyone I was going to quit smoking after my camping trip.
Okay. Did you smoke right before the show?
I did.
Wow. So what's the deal?
Well, I knew I was coming on the show to talk to you about quitting smoking, so.
Yeah.
And I needed a cigarette before I came on the show.
Oh, no, that's not good. Now, there are some pretty startling statistics when it comes to smoking. Frida, fill us in here.
So smoking obviously is just a huge health issue. In the United States, 480,000 people die of smoking-related illnesses per year. That's about 1 in 5 deaths being smoking-related. 9 out of 10 adult smokers tried cigarettes first by age 18. And to carry it further, roughly about a third of young people who start to smoke regularly before adulthood will eventually die from a smoking-related illness like lung cancer or heart disease.
Now, you started at 14. Did you ever intend to become a regular smoker when you started?
Not at all. When I started, I thought it was cool and I looked grown up, and I got addicted to it.
And so here's the thing. Teens don't start smoking saying, oh, wow, okay, I'm going all the way with it. They think that it can be casual. It looks cool. They're in. Their friends are doing it. So they smoke cigarettes or e-cigarettes. And they think, well, I can just quit whenever I want to. But here's some other startling statistics. Some research has shown us that within only days of starting casual smoking, teens can begin to show the signs of addiction. And further, some teens actually begin to show signs of dependence within 1 day of first inhaling.
1 day?
1 day.
Oh, wow. Now, this is your son, right?
Yes.
Okay, have you smoked at all, Austin?
No, I've been offered a cigarette before by my friends, but I've used my best judgment and said no.
Okay, so, all right. So, congratulations on that. You haven't gotten into the peer pressure, which is a big deal. And, you know, look, the best way to prevent a teen from becoming a smoker is to prevent them from ever starting smoking. And as a mom, you're right to be concerned. I mean, you're right to be concerned. You've seen firsthand the effects of having a parent who smokes combined with peer pressure and how it can influence a child in a negative way, because you have been there, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to share something personal with you. We have something in common in this situation. My mother was a lifelong smoker. She started when she was a teen. And she, like you, was determined that I would not smoke, and I did not. I do not. Like him. But she was so busy saving me that she did not save herself.
Like me.
Like you. My mother died the summer of my freshman year of medical school, suddenly of a stroke. And she had tried many times to quit, but it's hard. And so I would like to encourage you to keep trying to quit. It's not unusual, in fact, it's average that someone who successfully quits smoking takes 6 to 9 tries before they finally succeed. I always felt that my mother was 1 or 2 tries from quitting. So I would like to encourage you to see your doctor and a specialist who can work on putting a quit plan together that's right for you, something that you could work with. And we know you already have support,
Yes.
someone who really wants this to happen and will work with you. And of course, there are resources that are available. You can get started with some of the ones that we have on gethealthystayhealthy.com. But I really want you to not have Austin be me later without his mom, doing all the things that you just said. No graduation from medical school, no marriage, no grandchildren, none of that. And you have a chance.
Yes.
Yeah, it's never too late. And knowing yourself, do you think you'll cave? Would you do better if you had professional help?
Yes.